At its simplest articulation, a blockchain is a distributed, shared, time-stamped ledger. And why is that important? Let me explain. A time-stamped shared ledger is important for a few reasons. First, we'll start with transparency. Transparency so everyone in the network can see the ownership, the transference, the edits, the updates to the information. Next, a shared time-stamped ledger is trustless. As we've discussed before, it's verifiable by all parties, and we can trust the process and the system, so we don't have to rely on intermediaries or people who tend to be fallible. I guess that puts it nicely. Next is immutable. So there can't be any revisionist history or burning of the books because the entire network has verified the information, and so there can't be anyone going back and tinkering with an instance of that information because the entire network verified what was and will make sure that any malfeasance, any tinkering to previous information is not what gets perpetuated forward. Next, provenance, or authenticity. So provenance is the chronology of ownership, the custody, or location of a unique object. Who owns this painting? Who did before me? And all the available surrounding information that prove that that one thing is the real one thing, not the copy, not the alias, not a forgery. The final thing that makes a shared time-stamped ledger so important is the fact that it is decentralized. So it's removing all gatekeepers and middlemen from the process to make the currents of information flow easier and be more seeable and accessible between the different stakeholders, move more efficiently around the given system, and easier to simplify because. So, what are some examples of decentralized systems? Well, we've got a lot already in current history and in past history that we can easily reference to think about the power of decentralized systems. Lyft and Airbnb, these are decentralized taxi networks. Napster or BitTorrents are decentralized libraries to download information from. Wikipedia is a decentralized encyclopedia. Social movements of recent years, such as the Arab Spring, #MeToo, #BLM, these are decentralized movements. There's not one head to this snake. It is a hydra. There's multiple heads, all animated from a similar ethos. And one of my favorite examples when trying to imagine what a decentralized system looks like and the power it holds, I hark back to the First Nations people. When the Spanish conquistadors came to the quote-unquote New World, they came across some amazingly advanced societies in the Aztec and Mayans. The Spaniards were pretty swiftly able to topple those empires because both those empires were centrally governed. They had King Montezuma. As soon as Pizarro murdered Montezuma, he was king. Those civilizations rapidly crumbled shortly thereafter. And then the Spaniards went a little further north. They ran into the likes of the Apaches and the Navajos. And no matter what they did, the atrocities that they perpetuated, they were not able to stifle these cultures, whom by most modern accounts we might say were primitive when it comes to modern warfare, technologies, to help fend off and fight these battles. Doesn't matter how many chiefs Pizarro and his clans killed, the Apaches were able to live on because the networks of their communities was decentralized. Each tribe had a chief, and they operated from a similar ethos. They were connected, but there was not one single source of failure, not one central power that could dictate the rules that governed the entire Apache nation. So, because of the factors I've mentioned above, We can understand distributed ledgers to be trust machines because they provide transparency, they provide privacy, and they provide authenticity. All these characteristics and the underlying technology behind blockchain enable programmable data. These programmable data sets run on blockchains and make possible something called smart contracts. These are agreements, think laws, escrow accounts, if-then agreements, that need no intermediary to facilitate because the facilitation has been done with automation, with coding. So in 2013, Ethereum, initiated by a gentleman named Vitalik Buterin, created a platform for others to build solutions on top of that sought to reinvent the way automated applications of any type are run. Not just finance, like Bitcoin's focused on, but insurance, social media, communication, healthcare, everything. I mean, the goal of blockchains like Ethereum is to build the ultimate base layer of the global digital economy. Now, when I say base layer, I want you to think of Amazon Web Servers as a base layer of our current internet, or Google as a base layer of our current internet. These are foundations upon which whole entire ecosystems of products, tools, and services live, made possible by G Suite, made possible by Amazon Web Servers. The applications that live on top of blockchains like Ethereum, are changing the way markets are managed. It's changing the way that corporate, community, public governance is organized. It's changing the way how energy is created, distributed, and how public services interact with stakeholders, and how digital identity can be managed. So Ethereum is a network of interoperable smart contracts that facilitate more effective and secure transfer of data while retaining privacy and security of all the stakeholders. There's a video below in the show notes that I'd encourage you to review to learn a bit more about smart contracts. Because smart contracts are living on a number of blockchains, and each blockchain has a different way of facilitating decentralized exchange of important data privately and with trust baked into the process. These decentralized networks make decisions to confirm transactions and implement upgrades based on different consensus models. Bitcoin uses the proof of work consensus model. Ethereum, the proof of stake consensus model. While Bitcoin and Ethereum tend to have the biggest brands in the blockchain space, there are many other blockchains that have robust ecosystems and communities around them that are building some amazing tools and experimenting with some really powerful governance models. I strongly encourage you to check out such blockchain projects as Cardano, Algorand, Polkadot, Tezos, Theta, all of which you can find good links and videos explaining how those blockchains work, why they're a little bit different than the Bitcoins and the Ethereums of the world, in the show notes below. The smart contracts that these blockchains are enabling and connecting, they're not just being applied to certain functions or workflows, but to entire organizations. By interconnecting various smart contracts, a new breed of organizations are emerging that are being run without any leaders, without any managers, or without a board. In the last 4 years, we're seeing various experiments in organizations that are distributed and run by their community using solely smart contracts. These types of organizations are all run on the blockchain, and they go by the moniker DAO. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. DAOs are a way for a community with a shared purpose to equitably share power, decision-making, delegation, and voting. In other words, skin in the game governance. The essential features of DAOs is that their operating rules are programmed, meaning that they are automatically applied and enforced when the conditions specified in the software's smart contract. When I say software, And smart contract, we're using these interoperably right now. Smart contract's a little more specific, but a smart contract is essentially software. So when the conditions specified in that software are met, the rule is enforced. And this makes them much different from traditional organizations whose rules form guidelines that somebody, some human being, must interpret and apply. So imagine an organization whose members wish to allocate funds to a certain cause through some board decision. In the case of a traditional organization, once the board makes their decision, employees need to carry out many steps in order to release the funding. And this is everything from drafting the meeting notes to sending the money transfer instructions to the bank to monitoring the allocation of funds to reporting on the impacts of those funds. In the case of a DAO, the funds would be instantly transferred as a result of the board's approval, and nothing could stop it, neither internal stakeholders nor third parties such as banks or even a public authority. For the automated and secure execution of operating rules to be effective, they need to be running on public permissionless blockchains like Ethereum, like Cardano, like Polkadot, like Algorand. There are two main reasons why we need public permissionless blockchains to execute smart contracts. The first is traditional software cannot directly handle funds. It can only transfer orders to financial institutions, intermediaries in charge of moving the money around. So using public blockchains makes it possible to place that digital currency or another digital asset under the direct and unique control of the DAO, the Distributed Autonomous Organization, which acts as a software representation of the organization and of its rules of operation. Second, traditional software relies on infrastructure operated by a third party. If the rules are programmed in an application running on a cloud like Amazon Web Server or the Google Cloud or the Apple Cloud or let's say the company server for that matter, then the execution depends on the cloud operator or the IT department, which are vulnerable to outages, errors, and influence. A DAO is autonomous in the sense that its rules are self-enforced. No one can stop it or change it from the outside. The DAO is decentralized because it runs on decentralized infrastructure, these public permissionless blockchains that can't be taken over by a state or another party. The DAO is decentralized because it's not organized hierarchically around executives and C-suite and directors and shareholders and middle managers, so it doesn't concentrate power around these specific levels of the hierarchy. DAOs rely on a distributed governance system, meaning that their exercise of power within an organization needs to be collective. Some call this heterarchical, which means that they're based on mechanisms of cooperation without subordination. The promise that DAOs hold is their ability to coordinate a large number of people while avoiding the need for burdensome hierarchical structures and middle managers. And this characteristic makes them different from most traditional institutions, organizations, and power centers on a fundamental level. So, up to this point, business automation has often been understood to be the process of replacing low-skilled workers with robots or computers and keeping more quote-unquote qualified staff at the control. However, these public permissionless blockchains that enable DAOs, blockchains like Ethereum, blockchains like Cardano, and other blockchains are showing us that the opposite might be true, that we can replace management with software capable of recruiting, paying, executing, performing tasks that contribute to the company's mission. These smart contracts and all of the possibilities they enable have a wide array of applications, and innovators in every industry right now are working to bring these smart contracts and blockchain-based tools to bear in their setting. Below in the show notes, there's a handful of examples of how these decentralized applications, these smart contracts, are being deployed in all sorts of settings. from healthcare to file storage to identity to voting to lending to real estate to food to insurance and more and more. I encourage you to check out some of the videos below or do some of your own research. Jump into YouTube, type in blockchain, and add in your industry of interest, and you will be amazed at the efficiencies being created by building tools to support the more fluid, transparent, and secure flow of information on public permissionless blockchains.
Smart contracts can and already are making our service experience and interfacing with different service providers more frictionless, far more frictionless than we currently enjoy. With more systems that are mindfully aligned and incentivized, our lives, individually and collectively, can look much different than they currently do. When we align our stakeholders with their self-interest in concert with the interests of the greater system, we can begin to spiral up. The intention behind the structure of blockchains and their blockchain protocols can help us create more just society. For, as Marshall McLuhan said, if we better shape our tools will in turn better shape us. Keep learning, folks. A more just, secure, resilient future is much closer than you think.